Hello, welcome back to another video. Today is going to be my favorite books of 2022. I read, where's my laptop? I think it was around 40 something. I don't know, we'll figure it out together. I'm finding it. Okay. I read 43 books this year. That's it. I'm currently reading The Wars of the Roses by Alison Weir. I think I can finish it before 2023. So that means 44 bitches. So there are a lot. Don't know how long this video is gonna be. We'll see. I haven't even pulled them all out yet. They're still on my shelves, so we're gonna go around and start collecting them. Let's go. I have destroyed my bookshelves for this video. I read a lot of books. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when it's sitting next to me, it's a lot. There's several gaps in the shelves now. It doesn't matter. I'm going to go through all the books that I read in no particular order. I probably should have ordered them. I didn't plan this video ahead of time. So we're just gonna go through them and I'm gonna talk very quickly about my thoughts because there are a lot. Let's start. I have Royal Witches by Gemma Holman. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't enjoy this book. I felt like I only got one tab in here. It was not for me. I kind of got bored with it. Honestly, like, I couldn't tell you why. I had the audiobook, and I think sometimes when I read strictly history books in audiobook, I kind of let it get to a point where I just have it on really high speed and I'm not even listening anymore. I have to be really careful when I read history books in specific on audiobook because I will start blasting through it because I am trying to consume this giant tome of just facts and I start wanting it to get over with. I don't take my time like I should. I think I might have blasted through this one. What did I tab actually? Yeah, basically the only thing I got out of this was Henry V persecuted his mom for witchcraft. Woo! Witchcraft. Didn't love this book. Moving on. Lilac Girls by Martha Hall Kelly. I never planned to read this book. I never thought I was gonna read it. For a long time, I despised World War II historical fiction, and that was sheerly because I didn't know a lot about World War II. I was really pissed that the whole historical fiction section was World War II historical fiction, and I was thinking, where the hell is medieval, early modern, ancient? Anything other than a world war. I still think that. I still think World War II has way too much attention in the historical fiction field. But I got so pissed that I said, you know the fuck what? I'm picking up one of these. I'm gonna see what all the hype's about so that I can start arguing with people about why it shouldn't be so oversaturated in the genre. And I actually really liked it. It kind of blew my argument apart. I actually really like this book. It's about three women. It follows three women. My favorite of which is Kasha. I listened to the audiobook with this and I would recommend it for sure. I think she did the voice as well from what I can remember. The audiobook narrator. Description on the back, it doesn't really tell you what this book is about, but it's about the rabbits of Ravensbrück. There was this female concentration camp for specifically Polish women. I think you should read this, honestly, so I'm not gonna say too much, but this Nazi doctor does a bunch of experiments on these women and they're called the rabbits. I believe the writer wrote about this because it was an event that hadn't really been covered that much. A lot of people don't even know about it, so I'm really glad I read it, really read it. Can I talk? I'm really glad that I know about it now. I don't know, I really liked all the characters. I didn't like Caroline that much. Sue me. I didn't like Caroline. I liked Herta and I liked Kasha a lot. Kasha was my favorite. Sad stuff. Really good book. Moving on. We have The Exorcist, William Peter Blatty. I'm gonna say it, the movie was better. I'm sorry. The movie was better. I thought that if you've seen the movie, this book isn't that much of a shock to you. It's basically the movie in book form. It's pretty much book to screen adaptation. They didn't really leave much out. Honestly, I wouldn't waste my time. I think if you watch the movie, you know the book. It's not like Harry Potter where there's so many little details that are not in the movies. This pretty much covers it, if I'm honest. I didn't love it. I don't know. What did I rate this book? I haven't even been talking about ratings. I rated The Exorcist 3 stars. That sounds about right. It just wasn't novel. You know, probably should have read it before watching the movie. I pretty much said all there is to say about it. It wasn't that scary. I think definitely didn't age well in the way that it's not scary anymore. Probably in the 70s it was, I imagine, yes, it was very terrifying in the 70s. Currently, I would say not very scary. Moving on, The Diamond Eye. This was another World War II historical fiction. I have not been sticking to my guns with it. I said I wasn't gonna read World War II historical fiction, and then I read one and now I'm hooked. It's not taking over my reading life. I enjoy the occasional World War II historical fiction. This one was really good. It's about Lyudmila Pavlichenko. Basically has the most recorded kills of any sniper in history. You love to see it. She is very hardcore. You get to see a lot of her and Eleanor Roosevelt's relationship. I read it on audiobook and I thought it was pretty good. What did I rate it? I feel like I rated it 4 stars, but we're gonna see. I rated it 4 stars. I did. I know myself. What can I say? What? It's got pictures in the back? Oh my god, I never even knew. Anyway, she's a badass. She studied history in college, which means we're basically related. Anyways, moving on. There were not a lot of 5-star reads this year, so that was pretty good, having a 4-star read. Moving on, I, Claudius by Robert Graves. I expected a lot more from this book. I think it's got a movie, maybe more. I know there's another book. I'm probably not gonna read it. I don't know why, I just didn't like it that much. I think I got really, really bored with it. Claudius is more interesting in Margaret George's Confessions of Young Nero. I was kind of ticked that I had to finish it. I could not tell you a single thing that happened in this book. What did I rate it? I rated it 2 stars. Usually when I rate things 2 stars, it's because I feel bad that I didn't like it, so instead of 1, I give it 2. It's kind of rare that I have a book that I hate so much that I don't feel bad about giving it a bad rating, so I'll give it 1 star. I didn't love it. You should try it, definitely, because, I mean, it's super popular. There's gotta be a reason people love it. I wouldn't say, you know, don't try it. It just wasn't for me. Moving on. How to Be a Victorian by Ruth Goodman. Fantastic. I love this book. So many tabs. I adored it. This is the cover. First of all, beautiful. Super informative. Really detailed. Like, I have this fascination with the Victorians. I think it comes from Jack the Ripper. I have some fascination, and I don't know why, with the Victorians. I think everybody does. I don't think I'm unique in saying I have a fascination with them. They're so interesting, and learning about their everyday life is even more interesting. I gave this 5 stars after I just said that 5 stars aren't a usual thing for me. I gave this 5 stars. It's also even rarer that I give a nonfiction book 5 stars because I read them to be informative. I don't necessarily read them for enjoyment, even though I do enjoy learning things about history. That's why I read them. It's hard to write a history book or an informative book that's enjoyable, and this was really enjoyable. I feel like if you were writing a novel about Victorian time period, this would be really useful. It's just got their everyday things. What does it have? It has, I know, their hair, their makeup routine, their washing routines, their meals, what they ate, their exercise. Really interesting stuff in here. I'm really glad I read it. I really want to read How to Be a Tutor. That one's in my wish list. This is in the top for 2022. Moving on, we have Kit, Read All About It. This is probably the most intense book I've read this year. Really heavy stuff. No, it was just, I read this because childhood. I really like American Girls stories. I didn't have a lot of these when I was a kid, so it's sort of a way for me to be a child and read history. I didn't get into reading and definitely history until I was a lot older, so it's sort of a way for me to go back and be like, oh my god, I'm like a kid reading history, because I never got that experience. I didn't have like contact with history and books in a pleasant way until I was older. So this is really enjoyable for me. Especially since history books can be really dry, but historical fiction can sometimes be boring. This is really fast-paced, really good. The Great Depression it's not my area. I do enjoy reading things that are not my area because I can expand my knowledge. It was really good. I would definitely recommend it for all ages. Next, I read The Middle Ages, a graphic novel. This is by Eleanor, Janega and Neil Max Emanuel. This, I sort of just spotted at Barnes & Noble and I thought it was cool, so I got it. It's got some really cool illustrations. Let's see if I can show you. So like this kind of stuff. Just some really cool illustrations. It's got humor in it. It's not super funny, but it is. They do try to incorporate some humor into it. It sort of gives you an overview of medieval life, the religious sects that there were, and I don't know why I keep hitting my head with a book. Sort of just the groups that were in medieval Europe and important events that happened. I think my favorite thing that I learned in here was that Petrarch was the one who started calling it the Dark Ages, just because he was pissed. It says the idea of the Dark Ages is actually a medieval one, instigated by the Roman poet Petrarch. Because Petrarch thought Rome should still control all of Europe, he made up the term to talk trash. I adore Petrarch. I had to read Petrarch for one of my research projects. What a guy. He's so pessimistic and he's really dramatic. This one I feel like was probably a 4-star. I rated it what? I rated it 3 stars? I guess I could see that. Sort of didn't enjoy it later on. I think I had to kind of skim through it later on because some of the stuff I wasn't interested in, some of the stuff I already knew. I'm gonna stop talking about that. The Case Against Satan by Ray Russell. I read Ray Russell earlier in the year. I think it was, oh, it's right here, Haunted Castles. I read his Haunted Castles and I didn't love them. I liked one of them. I think it was called, I think it was Sardonicus. The whole story with the smile and it was all in the guy's mind, like he wasn't actually needing to smile, he permanently had this smile on his face. There's a movie, a silent film. It was called The Man Who Smiles and it was basically a horror silent film in the 20s. Okay, no, so maybe like the movie inspired him to write this because it seems like the movie came out before he wrote this. I'm going between books. Let's go back to The Case Against Satan. This book was The Exorcist. There's not really much difference. There's a different tone to it. It does include some sexual assaults. It's more like, with The Exorcist, there's literally nothing going, like, why does he choose Reagan? Why does he choose Reagan to possess? I don't believe there was really a reason. In this book, there is a reason why a demon or devil possessed, what's her name? Susan! Okay, why a demon possesses Susan is because of traumatic events that she's gone through, and so there was sort of an opening for the demon to possess her. In The Exorcist, it's sort of like why. I don't think it's really explained why Reagan. It just, what's his name? Pizzazu ends up in her attic. It's sort of coincidental, I believe. This one does have more explanation in it. I like that it sort of has more of a story outside of the possession, and after the possession there's resolution. Better than The Exorcist, I guess. I might recommend this more than The Exorcist. Definitely The Exorcist has more trying to throw profanities out there to shock you. This had, more creepy, not necessarily just shock factor kind of stuff. It actually did have a pretty cohesive plot. I don't remember what I rated it. I feel like I probably didn't rate it too high because when I read the book, it's sort of a process. But then when I'm done with it, I can look back and only think about the good parts for most books. I rated it 3 stars. I guess I just woke up and chose violence. Honestly, it's a little hard to justify my ratings now. No, I think I did like it, but it does sort of deal more with like realistic events than The Exorcist did. Anyways, I think I'm done talking about this. Moving on, Ray Russell's Haunted Houses. This is a collection of short stories, which I abhor collections of short stories. Oh my god, I almost dropped it. I don't know why, I just don't like it. It was okay, I really don't think, I don't recall finishing it or like any of the other stories other than Sardonicus. Probably didn't rate it very highly. I rated it 2 stars. Sardonicus was good. It was a little stretched out. I find myself really not wanting to talk about this book because I don't remember much. It was just Sardonicus that I remember. Next we have Augustus by Adrian Goldsworthy. This was a chonker. Only made a few tabs. I read this right at the end of my undergrad. It was just too much. It was too much for me. I got bored. I had to force myself to finish it. A lot of this stuff I just didn't care about. I always want to know more about Augustus. I love Augustus, but this was not the book for me. It was, you know how there's the beginning, the middle, and the end of a book? It was too much middle. I think I'm gonna honestly pass on talking about this too. I didn't love it. Let me see what I rated it. 2 stars. I was obviously very generous this year with my stars. Yeah, honestly, I couldn't tell you like anything that happened in this book. It did have some interesting things about maybe other people, like I think Atticus, who I learned about in school. A lot of things I marked were just random information that doesn't even concern Augustus, so we're gonna move on. The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. I love this book, but I love the first half of this book. The first half is really good in the way that I thought Dracula was really good in the first half. The creepy, scary suspense part is what I really like, sort of like before things get rolling. The Martians have come, they're destroying people, we don't know anything about them. I think there was a time jump and he had been hiding for a long time from the Martians. Once I got to that, I kind of zoned out. It was a little boring. It's like, all right, the Martians are here. It's happened. Really good book. Other than that, I thought they didn't do a great job in the movie of explaining why they just died. In the book, it does a better job of that. Basically, they couldn't handle our oxygen and the bacteria in our air. What did I rate that? I think I rated this 3 stars. And that was because of that second half that I really detested. Anyways, moving on. Next is The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels, which I didn't like. It was too much. I'm really good at suspending my disbelief. This was too much. I know it's supposed to be comedic. It went past the point of comedic to where it was just silly. It wasn't funny. I didn't really like the characters. I feel like they didn't have any connection. When the characters do actually get to that scene, it feels so unnatural. It feels like the wrong place in the book to be doing it, the wrong time to be doing it. It didn't feel like that should have happened right there. 2 stars. Moving on, a tip for the hangman. Is this cover not amazing? This was really good. Some of the creative liberties that were taken, I didn't enjoy. Okay, I love Elizabeth I, and I was so sad that we never saw her. It's about Kit Marlowe, who is a playwright, and also suspected of being a spy for Elizabeth I. It wasn't bad, it wasn't great, it was good. Kind of lost me 2/3 of the way through. I gave it 4 stars. All right, moving on. We have The Fur Hat. Please look at this. This was for school. Basically, it's about communism and the writers' union, and I'm not gonna go super into it. It's supposed to be a satire. It was okay. I don't love things that I have to read for school. Moving on, we have Daughters of Sparta by Claire Haywood. This was actually pretty good. I kept seeing it sit at Barnes & Noble and I didn't really like the cover. I finally just picked it up. I didn't know it was about Helen and Clytemnestra at first, so when I picked it up I was really excited because I do enjoy the story of Helen. And I really liked hearing more about Clytemnestra because we don't hear about her a lot in the actual myths. My camera died, so it is next day, same shirt. 3 stars. I don't know why it was 3 stars. I should start writing reviews because I literally don't remember why this was 3 stars. From what I remember, it should have been 4. So we're gonna move on. Next is Sophia Petrovna. I didn't love this. This was for school also. I think I just was forced to read it and I didn't really care for it. I think the subject is interesting. It's about a woman who, I think she works in, where does she work? She is a typist for the Leningrad Publishing House, and her son, I believe, is heavily into the communism. He sort of gets, I don't remember if it was framed or if he actually did do the crime that he was accused of in the book, but it's her sort of dealing with trying to visit him while he's in captivity. He's gonna be sent to the gulag. I thought it was, I mean, a lot of it was her having to go to this government office building and basically wait in line to talk to someone about him or to see him, and it showed that, you know, a lot of other women were going through this too, that their husbands and brothers and sons were being unlawfully accused of crimes, and they had to wait in these lines out in the cold for days to see them. Since I had to read it for school, not a very high rating. Moving on, Jo and Laurie. I prevented myself from reading this book for a long time. Felt like because Louise May Alcott didn't write the ending this way, it wasn't supposed to end this way, and I felt bad if I were gonna read published fan fiction about an ending to a story in which she did not want. Did that stop me? No, it did not, because I love fanfiction. I can't help myself. Oftentimes, it's better than the actual work. This was good. It wasn't great. The whole time I sort of felt like I shouldn't have been reading this. I rated it 4 stars. I really don't have much more to say on it. I don't remember. I must have read this. Okay, I read it at the beginning of the year, so I don't remember it too well. I do remember I felt semi-satisfied, not completely satisfied. I thought it was sweet. We're just gonna be done with it and we're gonna move on to the next book. The Manning Tree Witches by A.K. Blakemore. I also read this, I believe, towards the beginning of the year. I remember I liked it. I liked how historically accurate it was. I do remember there's sort of a epilogue afterwards. I did not like it. I felt like it was so odd and it didn't feel natural to me, and it felt like, why would you do that? 3 stars because I think maybe the first half of the book was really good, and that just the ending really really fucked with me. Moving on. This one was, for most people, this was like the highlight of their year. I feel like people who don't even read this book. I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I do not read autobiographies. I don't find them interesting, especially if the person is still alive. That is, ugh. I read this because, you guessed it, it was my childhood. iCarly, Sam and Cat, loved it. Ate that shit up. That was my jam. I saw she came out with this book. I wasn't gonna read it. I wasn't gonna read it. I read it. Like, all the Barnes & Nobles sold out of this book so fast. My Barnes & Noble only just got it back in stock like maybe 2 months ago, but I got this one way before that. It was the last one they had, and my boyfriend went over and snatched it off their display. He's the goat for that. I read this. I loved it. I don't know how you can not like this book. It made me depressed after reading it. It was so sad. It just boggles my mind that someone could be so hateful and so uncaring to their child. I just remember being in such a depressed funk for like a week after reading this because it was such heavy stuff. I usually don't read such heavy stuff, and if I do, it's a historical event and it's far away from me. I wouldn't recommend it if you're not willing to be just absolutely soul crushed. I rated it 5 stars. You can't hate me for that. Next, it's Paranormal Confessions by Kristen Lee. Literally devoured this in a few hours. I know it's short and that's not surprising, but that's really unusual for me to just eat a book up in one sitting. This is about a house which I didn't know about before, but it's called the Bel Air House. One of the most haunted houses in America. It was built in 1847. I believe there's a bunch of portals in it. I'm really into haunted stuff. I never used to be, and then last year I just like a switch flipped. I think it's because I went to Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios. I just am a horror junkie now. I used to hate anything horror or anything scary. I don't even really like mysteries, to be honest. I became obsessed. I watched a bunch of horror movies, I got really obsessed with watching with my mom Sam and Colby. I adore it. I adore horror. There's certain forms of horror I really don't like. Favorite is probably ghost and paranormal horror. Other than that, I don't love gory stuff. It doesn't really get me. It's about the Bel Air House and this woman's experience with it, and I think some other people's experiences with it that she's seen come and go in the Bel Air House, and it was just really interesting, really easy to read. Next, The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak? I was never gonna read this. I never planned to read this. Read it. I liked it. I didn't love it. I really wanted to love it. Like, I pushed myself to love it. I feel like I just saw the ending coming. Maybe that was the point. It just didn't hit me as hard as it should have. I was attached to all the characters, but it probably should have hit me harder. I rated it 4 stars, so that 4 is because it's not a 5 because it didn't hit me as hard as it should have. Fashion in the Middle Ages by Margaret Scott. This one I'm not going to talk about that much. It was more just a research thing. I find it really interesting what people wore in different time periods, so I picked this up at the Getty Museum. It didn't go into as much detail as I wanted it to, but it was still a good introduction to clothing and some of the styles that they had. I also didn't like that I couldn't write on the pages because they're all glossy. Hate that. Moving on. Next is The Terror. This book was really scary. If you've seen the show, that's the reason why I read this. Tabbed this twice apparently. They don't look like very interesting tabs. It's very long, for one. I want to see what I rated it. I rated it 4 stars. And there's a lot more detail in the book than in the show about the lore behind the beast. It took me 4 fucking ever to get through this book. It's over 700 pages. I sort of had to just force myself to get through this book. It's a very subtle horror book. It's supposed to be a historical fiction about the 1845 Franklin expedition. Basically, there was an expedition from England that went out to find the Northwest Passage through the Arctic, and they never came back. And we still don't really know what happened to them. We found some hints. We also just semi-recently found their ships. We don't for sure know what happened to the rest of the crew. This is sort of a historical fiction horror retelling. Really good. I'm gonna leave it at that for this book. The Kitchen Front by Jennifer Ryan. I listened to this on audiobook while I was working out at the gym, and I want to see what I rated it because I don't remember. 4 stars. Okay, there's a character in here, Lady Gwendolyn. I'm pretty sure it's Audrey that's the main character. Okay, I'm pretty sure it's Audrey, and then her sister is Lady Gwendolyn. Gwen is literally a bitch in the beginning. It was really nice to see her grow, though. We saw her inner turmoil and emotions about why she was behaving so badly to her sister, her reasons for her social climbing and backstabbing. I thought it was good. I really liked the ending because all of the girls ended up coming together and forming a restaurant among all of them, which was a pretty good ending. I kept wondering who was gonna win the contest. It turned out that I think the girl who needed it most won. Okay. The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. This murdered me this year. I am behind on all of my books for December because of this. It wasn't even worth it. I didn't like it. I had the good idea to go on Goodreads and see what reviews were for this book. It was a lot of people who loved the book telling people that didn't like the book that they just, if you didn't like this book, you just don't have what it takes to read Victorian literature. This is Victorian literature, the epitome of Victorian literature. It's long, it's wordy, it's elegant. If you don't like this book, then you don't have the patience or the endurance to get through what is classical Victorian literature. And I would like to formally call bullshit. If you didn't like this book, that's not to say that you don't have what it takes to read Victorian literature. That's not to say that you won't like any other Victorian literature. You just didn't like this one. I like Victorian literature. I didn't like this book. Wilkie Collins was asked to write basically a story for Charles Dickens's, I believe it was his newspaper that he was coming out with. It came out, I think it was monthly. Told in that setting, I think it might have been more digestible and read it in small increments. I tried to keep that in mind, and I still didn't like this book. If I was a Victorian, I probably would have loved this book. It was a good mystery book. I don't dock at any points for the plot or the characters or anything. They were well fleshed out characters. I really liked a lot of the characters. I really liked Mr. Fairley. I really liked Professor Pesca. It was simply too long. And I get that that's Victorian style, is to over describe everything, write lengthy novels. This specific lengthy novel just wasn't for me. I'm going to move on because I will literally shit a brick if I keep talking. Moving on to, I can't even reach it, Joan by Catherine J. Chen. I usually don't enjoy things that are not historically accurate. If you say you're a historical fiction, I really do enjoy books that try to adhere as much as they can to history while keeping an entertaining aspect. And I think that's what historical fiction is supposed to be. This was more just a straight up fiction book to me, and it took inspiration from Joan. It wasn't historically accurate. It didn't try to be. It didn't try to be historically accurate, but it was so good. Joan was not Joan as we know her through sources. This Joan was a lot more fierce. She didn't have the same physical attributes that the Joan that we know had. A lot of creative liberties were taken with her background, but I loved it. I loved it. It made Joan sort of like this fireball of hatred that was just going after the English because of a personal vendetta against them. It wasn't because God was telling her to, it was because she literally just fucking hated them. She had a lot of tragic things happen to her in her childhood, which really hardened her as a character later on in the story. I love her. I love this Joan. This Joan was amazing. This is a Joan that I could see on the big screen. Joan, as a historical figure today, might be a little hard to market in a movie because she did everything she did out of religious motivation, and because she had visions from saints and angels and God. But this Joan, this Joan could easily be made into a movie. It was really entertaining. I was rooting for Joan the whole time. Next book, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I lost my shit while reading this book. Literally bawled several times. I am so deeply attached to this book. I haven't had a favorite book, a new favorite book in, I want to say, maybe 3 years. This has made its way onto my favorites shelf. I don't have any other sci-fi on my favorites shelf. I have very few books on my favorites shelf. I have 1, 2, 3, 8, 9. I think I have 9. I have 9 books on my favorite shelf. Out of all the years that I've been reading, only 9 are my absolute favorites. And now this is 10. I wasn't gonna read this. And then I saw a booktuber talking about it. I picked it up. Oh my god. This was so emotional. I almost wanted to kill the author. Rocky in this book, I would die for him. He is my world. It's just the perfect blend of sci-fi, comedy, and literally ripping your heart out of your chest. The amount of times I cried for Rocky, I can't put into words how much I love this book. I really want more people to read it so I can talk about it. This was probably my top book of the year. Moving on. Death by Hot Apple Cider by Alex Erickson. I don't read mystery. I picked it up because it was autumn and I wanted to feel autumny. I have been grasping at straws this year. I have been desperately trying to gain some sort of seasonal festivity. So autumn came by and I was like, I need to get my fucking autumn spirit on. I need something that's gonna put me in the mood for autumn. I saw this. If this does not scream autumn to you, I picked it up, I read it, I liked it. This is the first mystery book I've ever read. I'm not one of those people that tries to solve the mystery. When there's a movie, I just let it go by. I roll with it. I don't try to solve it. I let it come to me. I do not try to solve the mystery. I tried to do that with this book and I called it, and I never get this shit right. I called it and I knew who the murderer was. Call me Sherlock fucking Holmes. I have a couple more mystery books to read that are like this. Dark and Stormy Murder, and I have Goodnight Moo. I'm gonna show it actually. Goodnight Moo. Back to this video. I didn't care for the romance. What did I rate this? I want to say like 3 or 4 stars, but I feel like it might have been 3. Yeah, it was 3 stars. Next we have The Wolf Den. I want to see what I rated this first actually before I open my mouth. I rated it 3 stars. It was about prostitutes in Pompeii. It just felt sort of monotonous and that we kept going through their days even when they didn't really matter to the story. So you get to see sort of how their days go as prostitutes in Pompeii. And I felt like it was, you sort of get a feel for their daily life and then it keeps going after that and it's like, okay, I've got it. I also felt like it didn't have a plot, and that might have been the author's intention. It might have added to the feeling of going through daily life with no plan as a prostitute in ancient Greece, and it's sort of all, everything blends together. I feel like I had to sort of really searched to find a plot, and it felt like the plot was maybe the main character trying to get out of prostitution, but it felt like she wasn't consistent with it. It wasn't like she had a set goal. I'm gonna get out of prostitution. I have a plan. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. It felt like if she saw an opportunity, she might, go for it a little bit, but then she'd sort of back off of it and go back to prostitution. And it wasn't really a problem. We kept going back and forth between, I'm gonna get out of prostitution, I'm gonna, get with this high up Greek official and get myself out of prostitution. And then we sort of just go back to the Wolf Den, which is the brothel that they live in. The plan just sort of flunks without any more talking about it. So do you want to get out or? Next we have SPQR by Mary Beard. This book is a nonfiction and it's just about ancient Rome. I've had it sitting, I've been trying to read this book since I feel like maybe 2016. It has so many good reviews and every time I get into it, I just can't. I don't like it. And I really love her. I love the author. I love watching her on her documentaries. I might have honestly skimmed the last bit of it because I can't remember. I think I'm gonna just put this down because I really don't have much to say on it. I rated it 2 stars, so I didn't love the content. Next we have Hooked by Emily McIntyre. It wasn't what I thought it was gonna be. I'm sick of retellings, but they're not actually retellings. I don't like when people say it's a retelling and then it's a completely different story and setting, but they just use the characters' names. For instance, when it's a Peter Pan retelling and Peter is a, I don't know, a mob boss or something. I just don't like that. I don't know. I mean, you could argue that is a retelling, but I don't know. I just don't like it. I feel like it's not what I signed up for. The whole line of Emily McIntyre's books in the Never After line is supposed to be really dark. It's not supposed to be the villain gets redemption and they get the girl and everything's good. It's supposed to be really dark, and I was like, okay, I can handle that, like dark. I can handle that. It was too dark. There's dark, and then there's like, okay, that's seriously twisted, you need therapy. Like years of therapy. I don't know why it didn't click for me that Hooked was a Hook romance novel. I literally thought this was a Peter Pan novel and it was just called Hooked because, I don't know, like Hook's the villain or something. I just pushed myself through this book. Hook is, his intentions are really bad. Some of the shit that comes out of his mouth, I seriously question. It just wasn't for me. I liked it, it was just a little too dark. I rated it 4 stars. Wow, that's higher than I thought. Yeah, so it was 4 stars, it was too dark. That's all I'm gonna say. Maybe I'm too light of a person. I mean, I thought I knew dark. That was a little too much. Sons of Rome. It's about Constantine and Maxentius. It's really good. They take a lot of creative liberties. Like, we don't know that a lot of this stuff that happens in here, we don't know that actually happened in history. So there are creative liberties, but I thought it was really good. I really loved the friendship between Maxentius and Constantine. I like their dynamic, how Maxentius is sort of the sit back and plan stuff. Constantine's more willing to sort of get into a fight. Not to say it's not like the brains and the brawn. They're both very intelligent. What did I rate this? I want to say I rated it 4 stars. I gave this 4 stars. It deserves it. I feel like all the characters are really nicely fleshed out, especially Maxentius's wife. What a bitch. She's literally the worst. She just lets her son wander off while there's riots going on. It does go through some major historical events. We go through Diocletian's Tetrarchy and his persecution of the Christians, so the Great Persecution. Really good content for drama. There's more in this series and I'm really excited to read it. I need to get the second book. We're almost done. Queen of Our Times. This is, as you can see, about Queen Elizabeth II. It's really big. It's really thick. I read this before the Queen passed. I just recently picked up an interest about the modern day royal family. I read this and over 600 pages and I still feel like I don't know the Queen. It sort of just goes through her life from birth. It did a good job focusing on her when she was younger, but once we got into her reign, when she was coronated, it more focused on the people around her. So her prime minister, a lot of figures of government were focused on sort of more than the Queen. I sort of wanted more of a more personal and emotional look on her life. I guess that's hard to get though when she's got the stoic face very down, you know, you never know what the Queen's feeling. Sort of focus more on government figures and the people around her and events that happened during her reign rather than focusing on the Queen herself. And I don't know how she handled things, or maybe how I would like to hear, because this author knows so much about the Queen and has spent so much time researching this, I would have liked to hear his thoughts on maybe what she might have been feeling during all of these events, even though, like I said, that is really hard to discern because she's such a private figure. I rated it 4 stars, so that's pretty good. Moving on, we have The Queen of the Tearling. I didn't really like this book. I rated it 3 stars. So I felt like nothing happened. I could sum this book up very easily. She just becomes queen, gets taken to the castle or wherever she's gonna be queen at. I think she deals with some difficulties. Some people don't really like that she's queen. That's what happens in this book, and you gotta like get to the next book to read more. I felt like nothing happened. Everything dragged on so long that nothing even happened. I liked the love interest. Wish we got more. I like the idea. I like the plot. I like the theme. I just felt like I didn't get anything out of this book. This whole thing was a prologue and you have to read the next book to actually read some content. Kind of just done. I'm not interested anymore. If you feel like, you know, I'm wrong and something did happen and you got a lot out of this book, I would love to hear it. Maybe I'm just viewing it in the wrong way. I just didn't feel like I read anything of any consequence. So we're gonna move on with that. I didn't love it. The cheat sheet. I love this. Super simple. Out of all the books, the like difficult books that I read, I felt like this was so nice to just be able to read a simple romance, and I really like their relationship. I have a really hard time finding romances. A lot of them currently are about sports, and I don't care for sports. And so if it's a football guy, a soccer guy, a hockey guy, I'm not interested. I picked this up because I was like, you know what, fuck it. I'm picking something up. I don't care what it is. They have to fake date. It has some really good characters. His whole team is involved in the book, and he's sort of like the head of the team. I don't know football terminology. I loved all their little personalities and how they were just rooting for the relationship as much as I was. His whole football team was. Really liked it. I rated it 4 stars. Next was The Rise and Fall of Ancient Egypt by Toby Wilkinson. I became interested in reading about ancient Egypt in this past year at some point. I don't remember when I read this. When did I read this? Okay, I read this in July. I don't really know what I wanted out of it, but it wasn't necessarily what I got. I kind of got bored after a while. I do this thing where I'm really into history books when I first start reading them. So you can see I tab a lot in the beginning, and then I start to fade out and I start to lose interest. And it just starts to, I think I have this problem where I try to read textbook style books as if they were fiction books and try to just devour them, and I sort of burn myself out. I don't know anything about the Egyptians, so it was sort of hard to intake all of this information, like learning an entirely new culture that I don't really know anything about. I'm sort of in the minority saying that I'm not interested in Cleopatra. I think I was more interested in their mythology, which I didn't get there wasn't really much mythology in this book. I don't know if I'm wrong in saying that after all the research I've done, they just don't have as in-depth mythology as Greeks or Romans do, where there's all of these cautionary tales and stories that are worked out, just epic poems about them. And I can't find any of that for Egyptians. It's more just little inscriptions about them that they exist, and they're very brief backstories on them. Okay, we're really almost done now, guys. Poison, a history. I sort of skimmed through this book. I'm very interested in poison and chemistry and their uses in history. I'm very interested in the affair of the poisons. So I wanted to read something about poisons. This just wasn't it for me. I don't know why. I kind of wanted to read more stories, and this felt just like I'm reading a textbook of facts about poison, like the poison, and it was used here and there, and it's also being used by the Greeks, and it's being used by you know, in the 1800s too, and it felt like I sort of wanted more stories about poisons, and I also would like to know their composition and stuff like that. It was just okay. What did I rate it? I rated it 3 stars. Good stuff. Dress codes. This was really good, actually. I didn't tab it a whole lot, but I liked it until about maybe 2/3 of the way through, because then it started talking more about modern clothing, which I don't care about. It starts too late for me. So it starts, I want to say maybe like 1500s, then it sort of goes from there into modern day. So around page 140 or something, it starts going into the 20s and then modern day. So around there I sort of lost interest, but the first half of the book is really good. It's about how people dress throughout history and how that evolved and changed and why it evolved and changed. Next one is The Last Wish. This is the first one from The Witcher. It's sort of like a introducing The Witcher. It took me a really long time to get to this, but once I finally read it, it was really good. There's some things different from the show. I would recommend it. If you like the show, I would recommend it. I'm excited to read the next few books and read stuff that we did not see in the show. Moving on, there are some books that I know I read on Kindle. I read the Greek Alexander romance. I had to read it for school. I'm really not going to talk about it. I didn't even rate it. I read some of it, but I really don't have anything to say on it. I don't think I liked it that much. Next, I read Dawn's Promise. This was actually on audiobook. I read this book and I really didn't like it. I rated it 1 star. I rated it 1 star. It just wasn't great. I didn't like the love interest. I really didn't. At some point, it starts getting really like magical and having a fantastical element. It's like, where the fuck did this come from? I had no clue what was going on. Like, someone started having sex with a tree, I'm pretty sure. It lost me. I didn't love it, and I would like to move on and forget about it. I read The Darkest Temptation. I rated this book 4 stars. I read it on Kindle. So it's the same thing with Hooked. There's this trope where the love interest wants to get back at the main character's dad. I wasn't loving it at this point. point in time. So it happened in The Darkest Temptation, and at some point I just kind of think, let it go, let it go. It lasted really long in The Darkest Temptation. Otherwise, I thought it was really good. It was very relatable to read because she's a very me character. She's very happy and everything's flower and sunshine. It was like what I wanted from Hooked. I think that is all the books I read in 2022. Top of the list, it's gotta be. I don't have a list yet for what I want to read next year. I do have a lot of books to read. Don't know which ones I'm gonna get to next year. Anyways, thank you for watching. Have a good day. Have a good life. Bye.